Good, bad, or otherwise, the Los Angeles Lakers are going to get attention.
The Lakers, we have to talk about them. We're contractually obligated to talk about how
They're a global brand built on superstars, showmanship, and Hollywood endings. Iconic moments like Kobe standing on the scorer's table, or Shaq throwing down a one-handed lob to cap off an all-time playoff comeback. Even the colors purple and gold are so regal, they seemingly belong in the spotlight. But recently, the franchise had fallen into a pattern. For the past few years, each season has been a drama-filled roller coaster that ends predictably enough to reinforce all the insulting stereotypes they've picked up. Loud off-seasons into turbulent opening months, punctuated by an uninspiring early exit in the playoffs. It was boringly repetitive. Fans everywhere started to feel like they've always been like this. Maybe the stories of them cinematically rising to the top of the league were just that, stories, retellings of a Lakers team that no longer existed. And the first half of the season only gave us more evidence for that conclusion. But recently, things have changed. The highlights have been a little bit flashier, and the crowds are getting a few decibels louder. And if you've been a fan long enough to remember what the City of Stars used to look like, then you can feel it. The music's swelling, the action's rising, and the main characters are finding their footing at just the right moment. Don't look now, and even if you do, feel free to deny that you saw it. But we have something that we have to say. Los Angeles is starting to look damn familiar. Hiring a young coach to lead a major market team is always risky, but hiring a young coach who could disingenuously be called a former podcaster by critics is professionally dangerous. The Lakers and JJ Redick knew that when this arrangement began, but heading into this season, there was a heightened sense of gravity around the situation. One more early playoff exit and the gloves would come off. The newspapers would verbally accost everyone involved with that decision, and JJ would find himself in the oddly familiar position of a national punching bag. But honestly, you could say the same for every important member of the team. Austin Reeves was an undrafted combo guard whose skill set was largely misunderstood when he came into the league. And even now that he's established himself as an upper echelon creator, he hasn't fully escaped the unique scrutiny that came with his pre-draft pedigree. Until Reeves helps the Lakers raise another banner, he'll always be one cold streak away from being everyone's favorite trade machine asset. DeAndre Ayton, on the other hand, was the first overall pick in his draft, and he quickly grew into an essential part of a finals team. Unfortunately, that was followed by a fall from grace so sudden and resounding that the former prize prospect turned into a punchline. He became a symbol of every tired critique of the new generation, and judging by the general interest in him as a free agent, this was his last chance to revitalize his career. Then of course there's LeBron James, the 41-year-old icon who will always be a lightning rod for any kind of criticism you can imagine, being too controlling behind the scenes, being too passive in key moments, not being Kobe or not playing like Jordan. It's all been said at some point or another, and now his newest challenge was proving that he could be an effective and valuable player in a scaled down role. In spite of his untouchable legacy, he still had to prove to the public that at this stage in his career, he was still capable. But comparatively, those were all minor narratives, secondary stories that accented the main event. The central question that this entire Lakers season hinged on was directed at Luka Doncic, and it was asked by his former team a year ago, because as insane and unimaginable as that trade was, the Mavericks front office didn't hide their reasoning behind it. They stated it clearly in interviews for months after the deal went down. Dallas didn't believe Luka was capable of leading a team to a championship. They knew better than anyone just how gifted the futuristic engine was at powering a half-court offense, but in their eyes, they'd seen enough of the other stuff, the lackluster defensive efforts, and elongated conversations with referees that came with the shot making and brilliant passing. And the Mavs were willing to gamble their future on the idea that the negatives outweighed the positives. I mean, surely they still could have gotten more for a generational talent. I'm not about to go down that wormhole though. That's not what this video is about. Fair or otherwise, this season, Luka and the rest of the Lakers would be playing for the sake of their reputations, and every morning talk show was going to function as a televised referendum on their trajectory. The spotlight comes at a cost. Ideally, the year would have started in conclusive fashion, either an overwhelming winning streak to silence the doubters, or an early rough patch that would get the wave of negativity out of the way. Neither of those happened. They simply continued on as an obscure group. One of their issues was availability. No matter who was healthy, through the first couple months, there was a key piece missing from their lineup. First, it was LeBron, who was sidelined with sciatica until mid-November. Soon after he returned, Austin Reeves went down with a calf strain. And throughout all of that, Luka was dealing with a handful of injuries that had him playing through occasional limps and grimaces. The injury report kept recycling names. There was always some glaring omission that skewed every outcome in one way or another. And beyond the injury report, there was more noise obscuring the picture. The first half of the Lakers' schedule was one of the easiest in the entire league, filled with rebuilding squads and unproven rosters. Memphis, Utah, New Orleans, those sort of teams. They were winning most of their games, but they weren't taking down world beaters. And on top of that, the games were kind of close. Los Angeles was scraping by the skin of their teeth repeatedly. They were an ambiguous contender, held together by a clutch record that seemed impossible to maintain. And as you can imagine, that opened up the conversation for everyone. It was perfectly defensible to say JJ Redick was out of his depth, and it was equally legitimate to argue that he'd built something uniquely playoff ready. LeBron was an old man making the Lakers worse, according to some people, and a rare, overqualified connector to others. Then there was Luka. The individual stats were inarguable. He was putting up some of the best numbers in the league on solid efficiency, but the three-point shooting was down significantly. Plus, the continued defensive issues and his occasional absences weren't doing much to combat the conditioning narrative, and it didn't stop there. The Aiden experiment was inconclusive. Austin Reeves was out too often to cement himself as an all-star level guard. Even the role players like Marcus Smart and Jake LaRavia were contentious to discuss. It was inescapable, and Christmas Day gave us the perfect encapsulation of the entire situation. Against Kevin Durant and the young supercharged Rockets, the Lakers showed up to the biggest game of the season with almost zero energy. Luka played through a late contusion. Reeves watched from the sideline, and Houston dismantled the Lakers in Los Angeles. No game that early in the season is catastrophic, especially not when the injury report has important names on it, but it wasn't encouraging. With 20 games to go before the All-Star break, LA was 23-11 against a mostly weak schedule with a net rating of exactly 0.0. In all likelihood, they were a playoff team, but anything beyond that was open to interpretation. They were either pretenders skating on increasingly thin ice, or a group of hardened clutch warriors who were still figuring out how to fine-tune everything. But either way, the charade couldn't go on for much longer. Los Angeles needed to make a statement over this next month, something to keep All-Star Weekend from being a break that was soaked in anxiety and local resentment. But early in January, the cracks in the foundation started spreading. After losing 2 games in a row, the Lakers needed a win, and the good news was they would be playing a Sacramento team that was on the verge of tanking. Unfortunately, through the first 3 quarters, their struggles continued. Reeves was out, LeBron couldn't find his shot, and the defense looked about as effective as a single sheet of wet paper. Heading into the 4th, they were down by 12 to a team that was unsure if they wanted to win this game. It was ugly, but the only thing preventing it from being disastrous was Luka. Through 3 quarters, he had 40 points on ridiculous efficiency, and all the signs were pointing towards another brilliant 4th quarter to bail them out. But those late game heroics never came. Luka scored 2 points in the 4th, and the Lakers lost by 12 points, the same number they trailed by heading into the final quarter. From there, the wheels started shaking. LA's pristine clutch offense started deteriorating, and without it, they couldn't find a way out of most of the holes they kept digging themselves into. There were still wins along the way, but for the most part, they were wins against the usual suspects, the teams they were supposed to beat. When they played the Spurs or the Thunder, they got exposed, thoroughly beaten in a way that seemed to point to the fundamental flaws within this team. Through the course of the next few weeks, the Lakers went 10-13, dropping them to 34-24 on the season, with only the bleak part part of their schedule left. And the reality of it was even worse than it looked on paper. In a game in early March against the Magic, Luka inexplicably passed up a potential game-tying shot, leaving LeBron to force up a contested fadeaway. And afterwards, no one could offer a reasonable explanation. While everyone waited to find out what was going on with the team's superstar, DeAndre Ayton started complaining about his role to the media. And after that, the bad vibes started crystallizing into something coherent and damning. The evidence and the player's own remarks told the story. The team was broken, and it started with the guy at the center of every possession. Luka Doncic was officially a problem.
When Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves play together, they're just not a good team.
The all-NBA talent was being ripped apart by virtually everyone, and he wasn't the only one. Every conclusion that had been loosely hinted towards was being firmly stated with an exclamation mark and a fiery tone. LeBron was an old man that didn't fit into the team structure. Redick had bitten off more than he could chew. Everyone on the roster, injured or otherwise, was under fire from every possible angle, and honestly, it felt justified. Lakers haters across the world were pointing and laughing while typing whatever they wanted into comment sections. If something didn't change, the offseason waiting on the horizon was going to be absolutely brutal. Stars passing up clutch time shots and starters complaining about their place on the team is usually the death sentence for a core. Those are pretty much two of the four horsemen of the franchise apocalypse, and then the third one showed up. Over in the Bay Area, JJ Redick and Luka got into a contentious exchange on the sideline as the star sat down on the bench. Jared Vanderbilt did maybe the best job of de-escalation we've ever seen, but it didn't erase the event, and neither did the win. That was a coach and a star getting into a public disagreement, and those never go over well in the eyes of the public. But then instead of the locker room bursting out into a destructive cycle of finger pointing, something shifted internally. At first, it was subtle. A few good wins over contending teams like the Knicks and the Timberwolves. A 50-point explosion from Luka after some ill-advised trash talking from modest Buzelis. Not triumphs, but rising actions. And then it got a little louder. On a nationally televised broadcast against Jokic and the Nuggets, Los Angeles was in for a prize fight, and this time they never stopped punching. They were playing defense and responding to Denver's brilliance without breaking stride. LeBron James was diving across the floor like he was still in his 20s. Austin Reeves perfectly executed a play from JJ Redick to send it into overtime. And on the last possession, Luka ended the game the way superstars end games. It wasn't undeniable, but it was there. That rumbling of momentum that feels tectonic and overwhelming. The kind of energy that only those purple and gold jerseys can harness. But they had another test waiting. A back-to-back in Houston against that same Rockets team that punched them in the mouth on Christmas morning. This was supposed to be the moment when they came back down to earth and the rest of the country got to exhale. To put it lightly, that's not what happened. LeBron kept his momentum going, and then Luka did that thing where he starts rising to the moment, hitting impossible shots, and most importantly, yelling at the crowd, screaming vindictively at every fan in attendance after ruining their nights with a flick of his wrist. To be blunt, it was frightening, downright terrifying for anyone who paid attention to the 2024 playoffs. And it didn't stop there. Just one day later, he went to Miami and gave the Heat 60 points on 30 shots to lead Los Angeles to their 8th win in a row. Then a few days later, a game winner from Luke Kennard, 9 in a row. And by that point, it was undeniable. Luka, LeBron, Austin Reeves, and everyone else associated with that iconic logo. They figured something out. Since that sideline argument, the Lakers have been playing beautiful, tough basketball, picturesque passing, ridiculous shots, and defense that would bring a wry smirk to Pat Riley's face. That doesn't mean anything definitive. If last year's playoffs proved anything, it's that the postseason is impossible to predict. But don't kid yourself. It does mean something, and we all know it. On the sideline, and in the mannerisms of their best player, the fun-loving Slovenian is morphing into the cold-blooded killer he's already proven he is, at exactly the right time. And the scariest part of all of this is we've seen it before. This is what Lakers do. Kobe, Shaq, Magic. They assemble teams built on star power, and eventually they put the pieces together. We know what this kind of momentum can do in that city, and it's not just them either. It's him, This is what Luka does. 2 years ago, we watched him go from a dangerous player to the most dangerous man on the planet for 3 straight months. And the entire time while he was burying his opponents, he was turning to the crowd and letting them know exactly who he was. The only thing that's changed is the jersey. We won't make any guarantees or bold predictions, but we will say this. All of us know what a Hollywood blockbuster feels like. And right now, even if you don't want to, you're sitting on the edge of your seats. Whatever happens next, don't be surprised.